As Joel already mentioned, I am Professor Gary Locklair. I've been teaching at Concordia University, Wisconsin for 2.8 decades. That'd be 28 years for the rest of us. I'm privileged and blessed to be able to teach a specific class here at Concordia University, Wisconsin that means a lot to me. And that's a course in our science department, Science 275, entitled Cosmogony. Usually before students come to class, they ask, are we going to learn how to trim beards and hair? And I say, no, that's cosmetology. Cosmogony is the science of origins. And I've been so thankful for the leadership here, Professor Ferry and the previous chair of our science department, Dr. Arnhold, our current chair of the science department, Dr. Corte, who not only allows me to indulge in my passion, but also actively supports that too. I want to thank you for being here. Really, there's no message to present if it weren't for you. Not only are you here supporting all of the speakers by your physical presence, and believe me, it's not exciting to talk to nobody. I will do that. If nobody shows up in class, I'll just give the presentation, because I like to hear myself talk. But it is more important and interesting when other people are involved. So I would encourage you to investigate the Society of Creation. Take a look at our website, www.societyofcreation.org. And Dr. Heck is the brainchild behind that, has done a great job of putting things together there and other resources. And look at our statement. And if you do agree with us and do say that, yes, I would like this message of creation to be put out, especially in the university system, then sign on with us. We would encourage that. And there's no link that says, donate to us. The theme for our conference is the origin of life. Did you catch the word origin? Because I'm sad to say that many of my evolutionary colleagues and friends seem to miss that word origin. We're talking about the beginning, not change after the fact. We're not talking about speciation, you already have something and now it... We're talking about the beginning. We're not talking about change of something pre-existing, but the origin of things. Where did that come from? Great question. Now, as a matter of fact, we've had some absolutely stunning presenters and highbrow academics here, and I'm not one of them. And the reason for that is because I am a college professor. I have to share with you a story. Two friends of mine, Zeb and Martha. Some of you are groaning already. When I tell you this story, I don't want you to panic because these are made-up friends of mine. But Zeb was very ill and he had a genetic brain condition and he needed a partial brain transplant. And of course, Martha, his wife, wanted to ensure that he had the best. So the doctor recommended that she go to the brain store and pick out just 1 ounce of brain, get the best kind you want, and we'll make sure that Zeb is okay. So she went to the brain store and she looked at the first case and there was rock star brains, $100 an ounce. And Martha says, well, that's good, but what else is available for Zeb? He went on to the athlete brains, $500 an ounce. Well, that'd be great. And she went, poet laureate, Nobel laureate. And finally, off in the distance in the store was this one solitary case illuminated with a bright light. And she walked up, and all she could see from a distance was $100,000 an ounce. When she got up to the case, she noticed that it said, College Professor Brains. Well, she asked the proprietor, excuse me, I want the best for my husband, but why is this case? Why are these brains so expensive? And the proprietor said, do you know how many college professors have to die before we can get 1 ounce of brain? What I want to share with you today is how to talk about some of these evidences. I'm sure that many of us have been involved with the ideas of creation and evolution for a while, and we do want to share these with other people. But I want to encourage you to think about one specific way of sharing these evidences. As Dr. Anderson said before, and I would reiterate that, I'm a creationary scientist because of what I do know, not because of what I don't know. What I want to do is present the evidences for creation in a positive sense. Now, we're going to talk about, can I present anti-evolution evidence? Absolutely. But I'm going to encourage you to think perhaps in a slightly different way. To think about the evidences for creation and how to present those in a very positive sense. And here's why. Because again, very few of us are going to stand up in a room like this, maybe debate an evolutionary scientist or an atheistic scientist with a large number of people looking on. Most of us are going to be interacting one-on-one. You'll be interacting with your family. You'll be interacting with your friends, someone you meet on the airplane, etc. And if they happen to say, oh, I was reading this about evolution, tell me what happens if the first thing somebody says about something you did was, it's a bunch of hooey. You're going to say, what? Even if you're not totally attracted to it, if somebody, the first words out of their mouth are, that's a bunch of nonsense. Hi, I'm a college professor. College professors are idiots. Thank you. Okay? I'm going to listen to what you have to say. You've really impacted my life tremendously. So what I'm going to suggest to you is to think about creation and the evidences for creation in a positive sense. Present them not as, I'm attacking somebody else's ideas or belief systems, but let me share with you why I believe what I believe. We'll try to be positive. You know, like the two hydrogen atoms that walked into the lab, and one turned to the other and says, I think I lost an electron. And the first one says, are you sure? I'm positive. Oh, sorry, that was a science joke. That was a science joke. Okay. See, here's the problem, and I've heard this, and if you've been involved in creation, you've probably heard this too. By the way, I use the term creationary scientist, and that may be unfamiliar to you. You've probably heard creationist. I'm sure you've heard creationism. Interestingly, nobody says evolutionism or evolutionist. Creationary is a good, valid term. So I'm a creationary scientist. Somebody will come up to me and say, you don't have any theories of your own. You just tear down other people's stuff. You know, you don't have anything positive to say about your model or idea. You just say, this couldn't be. Well, first of all, we don't technically have theories in origin science. We have models. But beyond the point, what they're saying is, show me the evidence. Don't just argue against my point of view. What is your point of view? Now, I do want to tell you it is okay to argue against the other side. I'm going to go through this. It's not that you can't say, that idea is wrong, that idea is incomplete. But when we start with people, let's start in the positive aspects of creation. Why would it be okay to show that there's something wrong with the other side? You know why that's okay? Because that's what Charles Darwin did. If you don't know, Charles Darwin's opus on the origin of species by natural selection was actually an attack against the current origin paradigm. What Darwin did is he said, design can't work. When you read, and here's the other thing too, because in class, I'll tell students, you can either read the book or you can just listen to what I have to say about it. What I found is everybody knows who Charles Darwin is. Nobody's read his book. Okay? If you read on the origins of species, you'll discover that what he does, I shouldn't say mainly, what he does a lot of is attack the other model. Is that okay to do? It is okay to do. But again, I think we'd have a stronger case if we focus on the positive. One thing we need to keep in mind is this. Every evidence has two sides. Every evidence cuts two ways. It's like a double-edged sword. There's one side and there's another side. A coin has two sides. It's the same coin. You can focus on the head of the coin. You could focus on the tail of the coin. It is the same coin. So if I do say something negative against the evolution model, there's also a positive creation aspect of that too. You know, do you remember playing 20 questions, perhaps in second or third grade? You know how 20 questions goes, right? I mean, my family and I do this on long drives, you know. You know the standard thing is supposed to be person, place, or thing? We do body parts, and so, you know, it takes a while to get to what exactly it is there. But in 20 questions, when you play it in second grade, somebody asks a question, you know, you know it's a person. Is this person living? And the answer is no. Everybody says, oh, that was a dumb way. You get just as much information as if somebody said yes. The no answer is just as valid. You know the person wasn't living versus the yes answer, yes, they are still living. So every evidence is going to cut two ways. But again, let's focus on the positive. Think about it this way. When you go into a court of law, there are two sides. There's the prosecution arguing one way, and there's the defense arguing another way. They're both talking about the same case. They both have the same facts. The evidence is the same for everybody. What's different is their point of view and where they're beginning from. The evidence is going to cut both ways. So we can look at one thing, and we can either focus on the positive aspect, or we could focus on the negative aspect. Let me give you an even better example. If you don't know, this is Chuck Norris. And in class, Chuck comes to visit students all the time. If you're not familiar with Chuck Norris, you just have to go online and figure. Chuck has done everything and anything well. If you've investigated Chuck Norris facts, you know some of them are positive. For example, Chuck Norris's tears cure cancer. Of course, the follow-on to that is too bad he's never cried. Right? We can also put a negative spin on Chuck Norris. And one of my favorite ones was Chuck Norris invented death to make life more exciting. You see, when you look at something, you can look at it in really two ways. Now, my laser pointer, because it's my thumb, isn't working very well today. When you look at this image, I just bet that some of you see one thing, and others you see something else. And if you know the trick, you see both of them. I'll just survey. How many of you see a young woman? Many people see a young woman. How many people see an old woman? A number of you do. Yeah. Now, with my handy laser pointer, what I'm going to show you is, if this is a young woman, the major feature you see up here is the side of her face and her chin viewing away. So there's her ear, and there's her nose, and she's sort of looking away. She's sort of wearing a choker collar. If you see an old woman, this prominent feature here is her large nose. She's looking down this way. This is her mouth. There's her nose. Okay, and that's her hair, so she's kind of looking this way. With any evidence, we can present it in one of two ways. And because we can do that, again, I'll just encourage you to think about the positive first. The negative is fine, useful, valid. But if you start with the positive, that will be good. Think about the way Martin Luther explained the commandments. You know, many non-Christians talk about just a bunch of rules. They just tell you what not to do. God's big into cutting down my fun there. When Martin Luther explained the commandments, and by the way, Lutherans, if you don't know, we number the commandments a little differently. So the fifth commandment, you shall not murder, Luther said, yeah, there's a negative side to that. Do not hurt or harm your neighbor in his body. Don't do that. And then there's also a positive side. Luther said God's Word doesn't just mean the negative, it also means we are to help and support our neighbor in every physical need. Cool. I always share this, and I know I did it in my overview presentation before, so I won't dwell on it. But you're going to hear people accuse you, if you do accept creation, of being an intellectual freak. Those are an exact quote somebody told me. You believe in creation? You are an intellectual freak. Actually, the idea of creation is a very reasonable idea. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You couldn't leave this conference after hearing our speakers and think that there isn't something valid and good here. So, because creation is reasonable, I do like to start with what I call pro-creation arguments. Now, when I talk about this in class, I've had students go and talk to Dr. Ferry and says, he's talking about procreation in class. There's a hyphen in that. It's pro-creation. Okay? So let's start. It's okay to talk about anti-evolution and the fact that this mechanism could not work. I'll show you that. That's fine. When it comes to the origin of life then, and when I take a look at cosmogony, I talk about 4 major origins. Everybody has to explain, how did life get here to begin with? The mechanism that I, as a creationary scientist, would say, if you asked me, how did life get here to begin with? This is what I say. God created life as matter with teleonomy. We need to throw out big words. Okay, that's important. Sometimes people will just stop right there, and then you're safe. But if you need a straightforward explanation, teleonomy refers to information content. The mechanism of the origin of life, from a creation perspective, is God created life as matter with teleonomy. And our other speakers have been telling you about that teleonomy. That's the DNA. Right? It blows us away, doesn't it? Okay. What I want to share with you then are just some of the evidences that I would share with someone. If a true, honest skeptic came up to me, not someone that says I'm an intellectual freak and doesn't want to really talk about it, but if an honest skeptic came up and said, okay, I'm open. I'm not convinced that evolution is true. I'm open to other ideas. What would you say? Give me some evidence that indicates that God created life as matter with teleonomy. I'm going to list several of these. On the first one, I'm going to show you how it cuts both ways. I think it's one that we're all familiar with, and it's sometimes easier to see the anti-view as opposed to the pro-view. But let's take a look at these evidences to support creation. There's a reason that I use the term evidence. In origin science, we don't have facts. We don't have proof in a sense that we do in other kinds of areas, like either mathematics or in operation science. The best we can do in origin science is, because it did happen in the unobserved past, we uncover this data and then we try to fit it into the model. How does that help? That's what Dr. Heck was talking about with the layers in the Grand Canyon. Right? Here, see how this fits into a young Earth with a relatively recent flood. So that's what we'll be doing here when it comes to life. This one I know is familiar to you. It's the law of biogenesis. Although it did not originate with Dr. Luis Pasteur, he absolutely, I believe, hopefully, finally put the idea of spontaneous generation to rest. The law of biogenesis usually simplistically says life only comes from life. Life only comes from life. Pasteur, by the way, if you don't know, was a creationary scientist and a Christian. If you know anything about the history of medicine, he was somewhat important in the development of a few things along the way there, right? But see, it's because of the pasteurization process that when you go to the store and buy a can of bean dip, when you take it home and open it up, there's not a mutant life form inside. Why? Because we killed, either by heat or radiation or all the organic material in there. Right? And so because it's been now sealed, it's been pasteurized, it is not somehow going to spontaneously develop into something. Great moments in shopping. Louis Pasteur buying his first quart of pasteurized milk. Thankfully, because of this idea, we do have sanitary food and sanitary water. We understand a number of things now because of Pasteur. But see, everybody understands the law of biogenesis. Evolutionary scientists understand it. Creationary scientists understand it. We all understand it. Okay? Some people look at it a little differently. Typically, when a creationary scientist brings up the law of biogenesis, they'll usually phrase it in an anti-evolution way. Right? And it's easy to see and it's easy to do. Look, how could dead chemicals spontaneously, without the input of intelligence, form living things? The law of biogenesis would seem to argue against that. Can you, outside of an intelligent, designed apparatus, move from dead chemicals to living things? The law of biogenesis says no. How can I take that same evidence, though, and present it in a positive light? See, if I'm talking to the honest skeptic, he hasn't brought that up. She hasn't said, well, what about this? They're just asking, tell me what you believe. Why do you believe that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth and created life as matter with teleonomy? Well, the pro way of presenting that same evidence is to say the origin of living things must have been a living God. The origin of life in this closed system known as the universe must have been something outside of the universe, something that transcended it. The origin of living things is due to a living God. That's what biogenesis would say. This is the comic strip Foxtrot. I don't know if you could see what they've made there, but Jason says, now if we can just find that hat that Frosty wore. No, I'm sorry. You are not going to get that snow monster to come to life through any kind of magic. Right? It doesn't work that way. Life comes from life. Another evidence that we could share. Oh, this one's a little controversial. And this is where I was called an intellectual freak, by the way. Okay? The uniqueness of life. This is going to be a pretty bold claim. Life appears unique to Earth. Now you say, well, it can't be true. Evolutionary scientists would say it's absolutely not true. Oh, let me share that in just a second. I want to get off. For some time, NASA has been looking for life at other places in our solar system and even outside of our solar system. I think space exploration is fantastic. But part of the purpose of space exploration has been to find life on other planets. If we find life on other planets, then that will, of course, prove a certain model of origins. The Viking missions to Mars is really old. When I was a little boy, this is the 1970s. And the Viking missions had state-of-the-art biological labs for the time in them. little hand came out, it scooped up some stuff, threw it in a thing, and they were looking for signs of life. Originally, they thought they had something. Then they discovered that maybe these are ambiguous. So we keep going back. We've gone back to Mars a few times. A few of them went to the wrong place, but that's another story. The current mission to Mars, the Curiosity rovers and etc., again, these are biological laboratories, and what are they doing? They are looking for life. You may not know. You might think, hey, that's a settled issue, right? Everybody knows there's a lot of life all over the place. This is the most recent issue of Scientific American. And this is their headline, How to Search for Life on Mars. This was their cover story. And this is how it begins. Experiments now under development could finally answer one of the most profound questions in science. Does life exist outside of Earth? When I talk to people, they say, really, haven't they already found a bunch of life out there? No, we haven't. So what's the point? I'm not saying there isn't life outside of Earth, but here's the problem. For my evolutionary colleagues, there has to be life outside of Earth, because if evolution happened as a non-directed, materialistic, by chance way, then it happens everywhere. You see, if it turns out that there's only life on planet Earth, what does that mean about planet Earth? Special, unique, purpose. And those words don't work in evolution. By the way, Chuck Norris proved that there is no life outside of the universe. Chuck Norris has proved this. Now, that wasn't true before his first space expedition. What's the interpretation of life appears unique to Earth? The interpretation is this. This would, if true, indicate design, plan, and purpose. If it's true that the only life that exists in the universe is here on planet Earth, then that indicates design, plan, and purpose. And those are three things that only apply to creation. The evolution model cannot talk about that. Design, plan, and purpose. Third evidence, complexity. Computer scientists, and that's my primary field, we deal with complexity a lot. Let me tell you simplistically what complexity is. Complexity, it's a complex subject. Complexity, let's just focus on two aspects. Number one, something to be complex has to have many components. A lot of people stop there. They say, well, there's many pieces and many things, then it's complex. No, not necessarily. In addition to having many pieces or many component parts, complexity means those parts interrelate in a specified way. For example, if I asked you to take 1,000 dominoes out of this box, and you've seen those things, right, where you line them up and you knock them down and they make a pretty picture type of thing, and do that, that would not be complex. It'd be tedious, time-consuming, and yes, we would say, that's pretty awesome what you did there. But it's not complex. Because, see, it doesn't matter which domino you pull out of the box to go here. You got the double 1, you got the 6 and the 4, it doesn't matter. They can be in any order. On the other hand, if you take a 1,000-piece picture puzzle, that not only has a number of pieces, but each piece only goes in one place. It has to connect in a specified location. So it's not just a lot of stuff. It's more than that. Living cells have specified complexity. Have you seen this from the scientists and others here who really know about this? I think so. If you're old like me, you'll appreciate this. When I was a little boy, I'm not kidding you. I was a chemistry major as an undergraduate. And even in the 1970s, one of my professors, he was really old then, said, the simple cell. Yeah, life was really simple then. And this is one of the drawings from my, I don't think this must have been my physical chemistry book. See, there wasn't much to it. You had that stuff and that. Folks, you need to laugh at these things. They'll make me feel better. Oh, thank you. Well, guess what? Guess what? There's no such thing as a simple cell. The tools of science have indicated to us that what we're looking at here is a fantastically complex machine. As Dr. Anderson just mentioned in his presentation, even the central dogma now is less and less useful. We don't even, genes, I don't know. Yeah. DNA, RNA, yeah, that was a convenient fiction. The complexity is enormous. To illustrate this, my friends Zeb and Zeke were throwing a party. All their friends came. And nobody knew exactly why there was a party going on here. And finally, Zeb and Zeke gathered everybody around. Friends, we called this party because we have just solved this complex puzzle. We've been working on this picture puzzle for almost 3 months. And we finally solved it. We took all our brain power, and it's done. And we want to celebrate with you and share our joy with you. And somebody asked, well, 3 months, how long should it have taken? And Zeke said, well, the puzzle said 3 to 5 years. We, as you've noticed in our other presenters, cells are so complex, we can't even wrap our brains around them. I used to tell this convenient story in cosmogony about, when Dr. Anderson was talking about the three-dimensional structure over 4D space, he used to talk about this convenient story about, it's like computer code that modifies itself. So when you read it versus when you run it, it's different. But it's even beyond that. We can't even understand the complexity of the simple cell. So how do we express that? We could say, oh, this is too complex to have arisen naturalistically. But isn't it so much better to say the hallmark of an awesome designer? Imagine the complexity. In 1953, Watson and Crick won the Nobel Prize for elucidating the structure of DNA. I love telling people that story because elucidating just means we figured out this double helix thing. They had no idea what it was doing or what it was about. We just figured out the rungs and the twisted ladder. No kidding. What a magnificent undertaking that was. Imagine the amount of effort it took to figure that out. Imagine the effort it took to create it in the first place. That's awesome. Life, fourth evidence. Life is more than chemistry. Now, life is made from chemistry, to be sure. Chemical components. But life isn't just chemistry. Evolutionary scientists, as you ask them, tell me the origin of life. The formula goes like this. Oh, look, I abbreviated things. You wouldn't know unless I told you. M is matter. That's stuff. I was glad both Jay Seeger and Kevin Anderson used the word stuff, because I use that all the time when I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. M is matter. That's the stuff. T is time, and E is energy. Matter plus time plus energy, that's all you need, and then you have life. As a creationary scientist, I'm not going to say that's wrong. That is not wrong. That's incomplete. It's missing one ingredient. You're batting 750. I mean, that's pretty good. If any Dodger batted 750, Dr. Heck would be ecstatic. Okay? I'm picking on it. The creationary form, I'm not going to say an evolutionary scientist is wrong. I'm just going to say, you're onto something. But you've missed a very vital ingredient. I, intelligence. And that's exactly what even the evolutionary origin of life experiments have injected into it. There's an intelligent human being using an intelligent apparatus and putting intelligent things together and saying, well, look, something happened. Absolutely. Matter plus time plus energy plus intelligence will give you life. And where did that intelligence come from? An omniscient God. Probability. You've heard this argument a lot. Again, it's oftentimes used as an anti-evolution argument. The probability of all the molecules getting together and just exactly right are astronomical. And you know what? That's true. But let's flip that argument on its head. What's the probability that an intelligent creator could create a complex machine? 100%. Evolutionary scientists will talk all the time about the minuscule probability of evolution. What's the probability of creation? 100%. If you saw that video presentation last night by Illustra Media on flight, you saw this NAV project. This was the creation of a robotic hummingbird to mimic hummingbird flight. A truly spectacular thing. And people look at, well, this thing won a number of prizes for engineering. And everybody said, what a spectacular feat. It doesn't look like a hummingbird. It doesn't do much like a hummingbird, but it kind of, flies around like a hummingbird. And the creators of this thing were praised. Yet if you look at a hummingbird, you say, oh, that just appeared. Okay? What's the probability that an intelligent creator could create a complex mechanism? 100%. I saved the one that I focus on for the last because I figured I would be spending too much time and I don't want to overload us. But I do want to talk just briefly about my pet, and that's information theory. I usually share this when I talk, and that is if you want to deal with other folks about creation, here's my word of advice. Find one evidence, just one. Understand it such that you can explain it to your children, and then you're ready to roll. If they ask you a question about ontogeny, recapitulating phylogeny, you know what? Like that, I don't care. Okay? That's fine. But if somebody asks you, why would you possibly believe in creation? Pull out that one evidence and share with them. And for me, that's information theory, and mainly because I am an information scientist. But simplistically, this is what information theory says. There's a cause and effect relationship. Intelligence is necessary to create information. If I flip that around, I'd say if I have information, which we do in the genome, where did that come from? There's only one legitimate scientific explanation, and that's intelligence. Now again, remember, we're talking about the ultimate origin. Here, usually, an evolutionary friend will interrupt and say, well, what about, if we have a truncation error, a transcription error, then you get something new. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where did that come from in the beginning? What's the origin of the genetic code? Science says information comes from intelligence. Here's my analogy. Imagine you've just read a good book. You set that book down and it was really good and you want to share that with somebody. Dr. Heck reads something from... Who is it that you always read all the time, Dr. Heck? He reads C.S. Lewis. And he sent me an email. I just ignore that. Hey, did you know Lewis wrote this? I don't care. I don't care. I'm kidding. Please go by his calendar. Okay, would you do that? That'll make up for this transgression that I've done here. But see, Dr. Heck just read this lost article from C.S. Lewis. And he's going to share that with people. He's excited about it. And somebody like me comes up and says, did you see C.S. Lewis write that? Dr. Heck says, no, I honestly didn't see him write that. Okay. Did you ask C.S. Lewis? No. Have you ever even met C.S. Lewis? He hasn't even met C.S. Lewis. What the heck? Then how do you know that C.S. Lewis wrote it? Dr. Heck just shakes his head. He says, of course he did. Why? Because the information content in that book demands an intelligent author. Words do not randomly self-assemble in warm little ponds in northern Wisconsin. Number one, it's impossible. Number two, there are no warm little ponds in northern Wisconsin. Okay? It doesn't happen. So what information theory says is this. Look, the information, the book, I didn't see C.S. Lewis write it. I didn't see anybody write it. Points to an intelligent cause. Even though you've never met Chuck Norris, okay? My wife got me, and my kids got me an autographed poster of Chuck Norris. You know there was some intelligence behind it. Absolutely. That's information theory. Oh, by the way, Chuck Norris doesn't read books. He stares them down to get the information he wants. Okay. Think about it this way. What's the origin of a computer? Is there a natural law that says silicon wants to become computers? There is not. Okay. If I tried to convince you that computers, that there's a natural law that they make, that wouldn't happen. Chance? Anybody who's been involved in the industry will tell you, no, this doesn't happen by chance. Would you agree that computers are designed tools? You would. Absolutely. Now, how can that be? You say, well, did you see the person make the computer here? You did not. How you know? Information theory. Okay. I'm going to ignore that. One maybe final thing. I know you can't see this very well, and that's not a very good picture of it either. I have in my hand, this is a sculpture made out of Mount St. Helens volcanic ash. My mother and father got this for me a number of years ago. It's very interesting. If you analyze this, if you put this in the laboratory, if you cut off little pieces and put it in a mass spectrometer, you would discover that this is only natural material. This is only natural material. Therefore, it had a natural origin. Do you think that this came out of Mount St. Helens looking like that? No. A human being fashioned this. You didn't see the human being do it? You don't know who did it? But you know they did do it. Because that figure conveys to you information. You know, interestingly, when an evolutionary scientist tells me, hey, you're always negative, I just say, no, I thought maybe it was some evolutionary scientists who are negative. I think you may have heard both of these quotes. I know that I heard the first one here from Francis Crick. Biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but evolved. If you're going to be a biologist, you have to remember what you're looking. I'm sorry, I know it looks like it was designed, but it wasn't. It evolved. Richard Dawkins. Biology is the study of complicated things that have the appearance of having been designed with a purpose. I agree with that. Every evidence that we come forth with creation can actually cut two ways. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying the law of biogenesis mitigates against the naturalistic development of, stuff into living things. Right? Nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to encourage you to think the positive way first. if what we're doing here does not ultimately point to the Creator, then I really think that everything we're doing is in vain anyway. And as some of the other presenters have pointed out more eloquently than I, this is a worldview issue. Are you going to be able to argue somebody, no, that's not going to happen. Romans 1, and many of you know this. What can be known about God is plain to them. His attributes have been clearly perceived in the things that He has created. And in Colossians 1, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. And the He there is Jesus Christ. By Him all things were created through Him and for Him. If I talk to somebody else about creation, it's not really to win the argument. Hey, information theory, I win. Okay? I hope that we can open the door just a little bit. Because quite frankly, if they accept the creation model or not isn't the biggest thing. There's something that has much more consequence, eternal consequence. And that is that relationship with the Creator Himself. I do need to plug, again, the Creation Research Society. If you didn't know, we've got a society devoted to doing the investigation, the hardcore science here. This stuff that I'm talking to you about, I didn't do that. It's people like Dr. Anderson. You'd like to help us, wouldn't you? You'd like to be part of it. Okay? More than $30 a year of your tax dollars, I believe, go to fund other kinds of research. Would you like to spend $30 and help us investigate the creation model of origins? Oh, that'd be kind of cool. Back on the CRS table, there's this little handout on the iDino project. Dr. Anderson, along with another board member of the Creation Research Society, are the primary investigators here, where they have uncovered soft tissue in dinosaurs. Some of you know that means dinosaurs are not millions of years old. They are relatively recent, on the order of thousands of years. You can't do this research without a tiny bit of funding, so we thank you for that. If you would rather go on break, you may do that. If you'd like to stay and ask questions, I'm going to entertain those too. But feel free. You're not trapped here. Get up and go. That will not bother me at all. But if you have questions, I'll entertain those. Question, Dr. Jastrow.
I agree that Louis Pasteur was a great scientist to prove the law of biogenesis, life comes only from life. But it's kind of a problem if you apply that to God producing life. After all, Louis Pasteur then could have found bacteria growing from sterile batches and say God's producing bacteria right now. Okay.
Yeah, the question is, and we do have to be careful with the God of the gaps. When you, and Dr. Jastrow's point was, what if I see bacteria growing in a sterile environment? I might conclude God did that right now then, right? We do have to be careful of invoking the so-called God of the gaps. If we don't know something and don't understand it, and then we say, oh, well, this is the way God did it, then what happens if we do uncover some other evidence later on? Then we look a little foolish. And the one reason I look foolish is I forgot to tell you up front, I don't know everything and I make mistakes. So, yep, that's a good point. Follow on to that?
It just seemed as though he was describing how creation works right now rather than
Thank you.
Trying to get back to the
yes.
origin of life.
Right.
And I think many scientists would agree that maybe that's how living things right now behave, but they think maybe something different happened to get it all started. So mixing of divine life and physical life might be kind of a problem.
Right. Another great point. What I call operation science, how things work in the here and now, and that's exactly what Louis Pasteur was doing. He was showing what happens right now. That is different than origin science, what happened in the past. So what I'm doing is I am using operation science to lend credibility to the origin science. You're absolutely right. Good point. Sir?
Might be sort of a bombshell question, but intelligence is only derived from a more intelligent creator.
The question is, so who created God? I don't want to be flippant, but here's my standard response. I will answer your question if you will answer mine. What color is the note middle C? Now you're saying, well, that doesn't make any sense. That question doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, music, they don't have a color attribute, right? Exactly. God, by definition, is an eternal being. Now, many more people, much smarter than I, can answer it better. But you're absolutely right. So then the question comes, who made or created God? But by definition, God is an eternal, uncreated being. You can argue against the existence of God. Absolutely. I don't know if that helped. Dr. Heck.
You warned about God of the gaps theory, but isn't there also a science of the gaps on the other side of the equation?
Sure. Yeah. God of the gaps on one side, science of the gaps on the other side. And I think we've heard that here, haven't we? Where at one time we believed that we knew the answer to this. Origin of life experiments are classic ones with Miller and Fox and others. But today, many even evolutionary scientists are pulling away from that, saying, no, you're right, that couldn't have happened. Good point. Okay. Another question? Sir.
Concluded by saying that everything ultimately leads positively to a creator, a God of love, Jesus. Can you just comment on the intelligent design that does not necessarily lead to that? What we should make of that?
Sure. The question is, what about the intelligent design movement, which I have great respect for, but I would not associate myself with, for that exact reason. My friends in the intelligent design movement were told, you can't play science with us by the evolutionary establishment because you keep talking about God. So they said, okay, we're not going to talk about God, we're just going to talk about design, plan, and purpose. For me, again, that's missing a little something. I've appreciated everything that the intelligent design movement has done scientifically, and there's been lots of great stuff there. But I just think that there's something missing to it. And that is, you do need to ultimately point to a creator. Without that aspect, why would we be talking about creation for me? I don't know if that answered the question, or...
I think they leave that open on purpose.
They do. Sure.
Because they cannot prove the existence of God.
Neither can I.
Right. And so they just leave it open.
Sure. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's it's a viable way of approaching the subject. Absolutely. Sir?
A quick comment. I've never figured out the Christian that thinks it took God millions of years to do what he did, and yet when they die, he's going to resurrect them immediately and fully.
Oh.
Those two parts are so contradictory, I can't figure out how you think.
That's interesting. Right. If God took so long at the beginning, but...
How in the world can he resurrect them?
Right. Interesting comment. Thank you. Sir.
We've had how many years now trying to create life from material? We've been working even longer trying to bring something dead back to life. We haven't accomplished either.
Right.
I think it'd be easier to take something that was once living,
Absolutely.
dies, and bring it back, Frankenstein or something.
Yes.
That hasn't worked either.
Right.
And if we did, what would that really prove except that it takes intelligence,
Yes.
purpose, design, and effort in order to create life?
Absolutely. When we do create life in a test tube, it will just be a testament to creation. That in no way validates the evolution model, right? It shows, again, matter plus time plus energy plus intelligence is necessary to create life. Okay. Folks, I'd be happy to talk to you individually, but I want to make sure that, Dr. Hick, you want to do some things? And then I just want to tell you there will be a video presentation, but I want to give you a little time in between that, so maybe we'll start at 4:15-ish or thereabouts. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to be showing the first episode of Unlocking the Mysteries of Genesis, which is a brand new 12-part series produced by the Institute for Creation Research, and I have permission from them to show the first episode of that. Okay.